Hey, Dylan.
Hey, Mike.
Dylan, I want to talk to you about the Sunburn Gaming Engine. But
I know that. We do this every week.
first I want to talk about Space Bears.
Oh,
What's your thought on the Space Bear issue? Where do you stand? You for or against Space Bears?
um, I don't know. Like, I didn't know it was an issue. What
Are
is
you
the...
terrified by the Space Bear? Let's get an image up of the Space Bear here. Are you does the Space Bear intimidate you? Or, are you okay? Like, how does a Space Bear relate to an Earth Bear,
I don't know. Is it sentient? Is it, like, intelligent?
Well, it's flying a fucking ship. So
Okay,
I
yes,
think
then it's
if you were to
intelligent, yes.
treat it like an Earth Bear and lay down and play dead,
This isn't like a furry
it would
thing,
shoot
is
you
it?
with your laser gun, I think. They've evolved to the point where they have interstellar travel. Um, so I don't know still a whole lot about the game Star Drive, other than it has space bears, and that's a thing. Um, but what I do know about is Star Drive is that it uses the Sunburn gaming engine, and some good news from these guys. They were just picked up with a publisher contract. American publisher Zero Sum Games are excited to announce they've signed a worldwide publishing deal for the PC game Star Drive. Who'd they sign it with? Iceberg Interactive. Okay.
So what platforms?
Definitely PC. PC remains. And I don't think I gleaned from this the platform that they were explicitly going to. It talks a lot about the games, and um, it is PC number one, though. So it's an XNA game. I don't know if that means there's a chance.
I mean, I guess like Xbox or something like that.
Yeah, a chance for an Xbox and XBLA version. But the cool thing is that the game is using the Sunburn gaming engine. And, we said this a lot of times, but graphics are very important. And the Sunburn gaming engine can give you a lot of graphic power for not a lot of CPU cost. So you can look great without having a lot of the overhead problems if you were to go off on your own, or just use some native things, especially in the XNA framework. And using the Sunburn gaming engine can save you that time, but the looks are probably a big reason as to why SkyDrive, Star Drive, not SkyDrive, that's a Microsoft poorly named product, Star Drive got picked up. Again here, checking out some of the images here.
There's a space bear and 5 gigs of free space in the cloud. No, SkyDrive.
Well, like the Space Owls apparently have like weird iPad things happening. I don't know what he's doing there.
Could be using SkyDrive, is what you're saying.
He could be. He could be actively connected in, and he looks pretty pissed actually that his live account is no longer going to be an Xbox. It's going to be a live account because they did away with live, so it's just an account or something. I don't know what
So
that is.
angry owls and space bears.
Well, and then also, pipe smoking generals. The Sunburn gaming engine does support pipe smoking generals. So, and all these guys definitely, because they're in space, have an Iron Man style heads up display. Just touch the screen, move everything around. So it probably supports Pepper, virtual Pepper as well. I would say
I don't know what that is. Oh,
Pepper's the assistant.
okay. In Iron Man.
Yes.
Iron Man. Okay.
Yeah.
We're still Iron Man.
We move fast. Stay with me.
No, in this case, we didn't move fast. I thought we'd moved on to something else, and we hadn't.
And then this thing, whatever that is, some chess playing alien. He looks mean, but he really just wants to play a nice game of chess and have a beer with you. That's it. Just don't judge a race by their looks, right? Unless they're space bears, and then you need to shoot first. right? Because they'll
Space
maul,
bears.
they'll space maul you, and that's not pretty. No one wants to be space mauled. So, Sunburn Gaming Engine. Support for pipe smoking captains and space bears and aliens that just want to play chess with you but look really evil.
Angry owls.
And angry
with
owls
iPads.
with iPads. Or it could have been a Windows 8 tablet. Or, he's in space. It could have been a
any
Windows
tablet.
9 tablet.
It is in the future. It could be anything.
It's possible. Possible. To learn more about Synapse Gaming, check out synapsegaming.com. All right.
From here, that last alien, it looked like it had DJ tables. And I'm like, it's a DJ. It's a DJ.
DJ Land.
Now, he has a virtual keyboard. Because he's a space bear, his fingers are very big and they wouldn't fit in a normal keyboard. So by having a virtual keyboard, they can just expand it to the entire size of the desk.
It's like one of those projectors that can project out the keyboard. And
It's ergonomically correct.
He's got the
Or
little
space
Wiimote
bear.
camera pointing at it with a projector and little RFID tags on there. Because even though they evolved to space,
They're still
infrared
using-
technology is the tops of their wireless communication system. Because they're still bears. I mean, it's hard to make electronics when you're a bear. You get a little hot hair in the parts, you don't have the finger dexterity.
You're thinking far too much about the
Well,
development.
I
of
believe the
culture
bears,
and
the space
technology.
bears, are invading the space owls to enslave them to make their tiny electronics so they can have iPods.
So what's the deal with
pretty
the space
sure.
humans?
Well,
Well-
humans go anywhere. We're like roaches.
Yeah, I mean, we just screwed
The
things up.
default race in the
But I think that is the plot of the game. The plot of the game is the space bears are invading the space owls to capture them and have them make iPods for the space bears because they can't make iPods with fingers that small. And then the humans, we just kind of get wrapped up in the middle because we're just out there screwing around.
as we always do.
As we do.
in
Yeah, we just
sci-fi.
assume we can go anywhere. I'm almost certain that is the plot of Star Drive. I haven't read anything about Star Drive, but my gut tells me
But we did an ad featuring Star
we
Drive,
did.
so
That's what it said.
that's okay.
Oh, well. Well, welcome everyone to the show. The show, we're going to talk a little bit later. We're going to get into the show on some new tools that we've been using, or maybe they're not all new. Some of them are new to us. Some of them we've been using for a while. But these are not tools for coding that we've talked about in the past on one show. These are more asset creation tools. So that'll be the topic, and I promise we'll try to get to the topic.
Yeah.
I've queued up items to remind me we have a topic to get to. So the damn game dev robot retweeting me every time I say the word game dev. That I'm gonna block the game dev robot, and then it can't retweet me anymore, right? That's how that works, right?
No. But
No.
Well, it wouldn't be able to see my tweet.
Well, first you have to block
no,
it.
I guess you're right. It would be blocked.
Uh,
Block and report as spam.
so Dylan, let's talk. Well, I don't know why I started that one. That's not the one I want. There's the one I meant. Okay, I got them both up. Zynga. Draw something. Their evil plan for making money has been revealed.
Buy games that are successful and hope they keep going.
Well, but there's no money being made from Draw Something except ads. That's not the Zynga model. But the Zynga model doesn't really work well. Like, you're not going to buy a whole bunch of colors, especially when you get all the coins for free in the game.
Yeah,
For
if you're
playing it.
if you're playing actively, you're gonna eventually earn that stuff.
But
Which,
you don't really need the colors anyway. You find yourself using like two. Like, draw it in black and point a red arrow to something. But they
if you're
have...
really artistically inclined, you might. But even then, I mean, it's a toolbox. It's not like this very tightly designed game environment like Tiny Tower, where it's practically begging you to buy stuff. gotta make
so that
their
doesn't
own
work for them.
game.
So how are they going to make money on Draw Something now that they've got it? How are they going to monetize it? They're going to sell words.
Really?
Yes, if you want the word Coca-Cola in there, then Mr. Coca-Cola, pony up.
Oh, they're gonna sell words to advertisers.
I guess, yeah. I guess that Coca-Cola would... I would
Not
hope...
like you could buy a word list.
Oh, God, I hope that doesn't... No, I'm pretty sure...
Because I was gonna say, if you could buy a word list, okay, that
Yes, paid for but
That's-
directly by other companies. God, that'd be
Okay.
horrible. Like, hey, do you want this word? Buy it. you know?
Well, I mean, you could buy like a dictionary. It'd be like an expansion pack, but that seems... That's going to get out of hand, I think. Like, that's the type of thing that if that starts pissing people off, if there's just like... If it's too much a presence, people are just going to start, you know...
So, should we start buying some words?
Making fun of it. No, I don't like where this is going.
Not big enough for that, sir.
No.
Not yet.
I mean, first of all, a couple of
GameMarx,
mine...
what's that?
Well, yeah, there's GameMarx. There's obviously, like, you know, what is that? You know, I have to go look that up. But I was thinking, like, phallic. That'd be a good word. You know?
Wow.
Like, I'm not promoting anything in general other than...
Basically, it's pay to troll.
Yes, exactly. You know, I'm just going to give the trolls something to go. And like, how would you draw phallic? Would you draw a penis and then put it in quotes?
I don't want to think about that. Like, I just don't want to, like...
Money shot.
That's stuff that... That's 2 words. It can be broken down.
Is there enough letters for money shot? I think there's enough letters for money shot.
I don't know how many...
I forget.
letters.
Yeah, it's up there.
I
maybe.
think it's one too many.
Yeah? Can we get penetration?
That's not so bad. Like,
That's not so bad until you think about how do you draw penetration in a way that somebody would guess that.
Well...
And how will most people draw that word?
Okay. I was gonna say, well, you could use like the football diagrams or something, like penetration into the defense. Or, you know, any of the clean ways that word can be used. But what fun is that?
Exactly. No, you know, pedophile.
Oh,
I'm gonna take them down from the inside. I'm gonna take them down by becoming one of them.
Are they gonna care? Like, are they gonna care? You buy a bunch of words, you're funding Zynga.
Yeah, I don't know what the how they're gonna set it up. If it's gonna be like you got to contact Zynga and do it off, or is it gonna be a site you can go in and?
I'm assuming it won't be like AdWords or something.
Yeah, you can
like
just
that.
like bid on a word or something.
I'm assuming you'll have to have some sort of contract. You know.
Yeah, because I'm guessing they're probably not set up to where they can like pull them out either.
Yeah, and it's not going to be worth their time for people to nickel and dime words. You know, it's probably going to be like an advertising.
I got to
contract.
run a stories here that are going to be somewhat related.
Okay.
The first one up here is exploitation of developers is getting worse, and David Dvorak.
Dvorak?
No, it's not Dvorak. No V. Just David Dvorak without the V. Interview with Eurogamer. About his experience creating Time Splitters, Second Sight, and the canceled Battlefront 3. Basically, the contracts are written, and I read a little bit on this over last weekend of game contracts and how typically they get structured and things like that, is that they pay... So you sign the contract and say the contracts are $500,000 for you to develop the game. They don't give you $500,000. They give you a tenth of that for 10 months, right? So you'll get $50,000 every month for 10 months to make the game. And for them to pay that, you have to deliver these milestones. And that the way these things are written, they could find any stupid reason to say a milestone was missed, or this is not happy, or we don't like this. And then you have to work an extra month without pay, basically. So you get your $500,000 still, they don't have to give it to you that month. Like it normally, the normal contract thing.
It comes at the end of the contract, basically.
Right, yeah. So it's like, well, only when they're happy with that milestone do they give you that money, but then it's set on an interval, so you can't even kind of get ahead or anything. And that's becoming real exploitative because they kind of feature creep this way, and stretch out development cycles so that the developers put more time and effort into the game than they're willing to pay for.
It makes sense if they hold both the power to dictate the terms and then also the power to determine when those terms have been met.
Right. And, the other thing that's mentioned, David mentions in there too, is that you're always going to be exploitable when you see something as your dream. So being a game
Yes.
developer is my dream. People can exploit you for that and take advantage of that. So I mean, there's partly it's complacency on the game development studios to accept such terms. You know.
Yeah, I can see that. No one would do that to a business developer because no one says, I want to build charts and graphs,
Yeah.
and tables.
And also,
stuff.
I mean, there's a nobody's like, my dream is to build a business developer. So they're like, no, screw you. I'm not signing that contract. Go get somebody else to do it, you know? And then you find out you can't hire anybody else or not anybody good. And then so you're back and you can't get away with that stuff. But, so the next article, like I said, these are kind of linked. Red links. Being indie doesn't always mean you're independent. And this is kind of, I think, a view that people know that are out there. CEO of Trials Evolution Studio, Red Links. So, very popular game, Trials Evolution. He's kind of happy being purchased, being an owned studio, because there's a lot of things removed from concern. You don't worry about healthcare. You don't worry about exact budgets and pitches and things like that. You kind of, which I guess is good, so long as you can still make the games you want to make, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the other side of that coin, is that because he's the studio that created Trials and, Trials Evolution, they have some cash, if you will, inside the publisher to do what they want. I think it's a good route if you become an indie studio to get acquired, because that usually they acquire you to make them more games and to run as a unit inside,
Yeah. And if they wanted just someone to build the games that they want to build, the publisher wants them to build, they would hire you, they wouldn't go out and buy a successful publisher to do that necessarily. But I mean, it's just, the fact is there are multiple types of freedom. The freedom to do your own thing, the freedom to not have to worry about, all those little business issues.
That's a perfect setup.
And you have to it's a continuum, I'm sure.
That's a perfect setup for Notch's tirade against EA. Did you see any of these tweets?
I did not.
I missed them.
So, basically EA has released an indie bundle. Okay?
Okay.
Yes, on Steam.
And the indie bundle has Deathspank, Shank, Warp, and basically Notch has taken this to be a cynical bunch of bastards at EA, and it's really EA capitalizing on the indie trend right now, to where indies are having, this kind of indie uprising, and humble bundles becoming popular, and the word indie is carrying a certain amount of popularity, right, in gaming right now. And this is just EA going out and saying, like, we've got an indie bundle, so they can just grab the word indie. And not
Are these
basically
games that were developed independently before EA bought them? Or what?
I don't think so. I think they're under the EA Partners thing.
But they were smaller studios that got bought out, I'm assuming. Smaller independent.
It raises the question, though, what is indie?
I kind of wonder if this means we're going in a direction, like video games are going in the same direction as music, in the sense that there is a genre called indie rock. It is not necessarily, like, all music that is made independently is not necessarily
Indie
rock, but it's just that the genre of music developed kind of in parallel with independent music kind of coming into its own. So it's linked, kind of like alternative music. Alternative to what? It's everything now. So
Right, yeah. Once alternative, because it was alternative to the mainstream, yet it quickly became the mainstream.
So I guess what you're getting now is all the games that EA released are games that kind of have that indie feel. They're small. They're not quite casual, but they're not hardcore.
Not EA Sports. Get in the game.
Exactly. They're not Call of Duty, but they're not. For
me, and this definition is not going to survive time, because time is changing rapidly. And the makeup of how publishing is done, for me, would be you're not owned by a publishing studio. And I mean, the company is out and out owned. If you want to be on XBLA, right? Bastion, everybody would call an indie game, but it's on XBLA. That means at some point they had a Microsoft publishing contract because that's the only way you get to Xbox.
They did, but it doesn't necessarily mean that was their only...
Exactly, so that they were not owned by Microsoft.
But then again, Steam.
They just had a contract with Microsoft, and then they had a contract with Steam to publish it as well. And that the studio had the ability to be independent and go back out. You know, maybe there's a period of exclusivity or something, but I think if you're just establishing a contract for a game, and that your next game isn't being told to you, but you're pitching it still to, then you're indie. I don't think you can call indie off of a monetary or size level, because that's rough. Because Notch says he wouldn't call himself indie, but I would call him indie. I mean, he's calling his own shots, he's making his own games, and for the most part, he's publishing his own games. I mean,
Minecraft, but...
Yeah, that's, Minecraft at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised if Scrolls doesn't just pop up on, the Minecraft sites and sell that way as well, because he could do it, right?
He could do it. He's in a unique position.
And then, getting on Steam doesn't require a publishing contract. That's just a revenue agreement, really. But it's not a publishing contract in the sense that Valve asserts any ownership to the game whatsoever. If they want to pull it from Steam, they can pull it from Steam. They can change the price anytime they want on Steam. So Valve is basically, it's an app store agreement. Whereas a publisher would take IP rights, they would take a cut, of the profits up front or for a certain amount of time. They would dictate where else it might show up on what other platforms, how it rolls out.
It might just be that at this point, especially where indie games have gone, that indie is just not a good descriptive term to use. Like, there are other, small budget, or there are other... There's kind of an array of other terms that could be used for these different aspects. The budget they have, the publishing agreement, the type of game it is, that we kind of paint with a broad brush with the term indie. Right. So.
And, another hard one to categorize is Tim Schafer and Double Fine, right?
Yeah.
They're obviously an independent studio, and the fact that they're not tied to a publisher, but they're huge. But the fact they did Brutal Legend and Stacking and another game that recent memory is escaping my mind, those went through publisher contracts. They still had to go to Kickstarter to do the game they wanted to do.
Yeah.
So
they may not be an indie studio, but they're building an indie game. Is kind of
Trenched. Yeah, that was the other game. Yeah. But they were also held to their successes very hard too, because Trenched and Brutal Legend did not do as well as I think publishers wanted, and in that situation, they're not going to let them do a game in a dead genre like a point-and-click adventure. So, at some degree, they're still an independent studio in that sense. They're not guaranteed that anything they do is going to be published.
Well, it almost, again, like, indie is not a very good descriptive term, and therefore it can't necessarily carry this ethical weight of, like, well, these people are outside of the publishing structure, therefore it is better to support them. It's kind of like the difference between, like, all natural and organic and, all of these different terms, fair trade, that get used in other arenas that kind of carry that ethical weight with them. And they can be abused because they carry that weight.
Yeah, and then of course coming full circle back to what EA is doing with their indie bundle. The EA does have this EA Partners program. They're supposed to be reaching out to indies more. I don't know anybody that's done that. I don't know details on that to know how indie is the indie program. Do they still try to take IP rights in that program? If they do, it's kind of shitty, I would say.
But if they don't, then it exists somewhere between, like, what we think of when we hear the term indie and
then it becomes its own kind of thing, and
with Kickstarter and things like that.
And the reason I said my definition is not going to scale is because as we go to digital publishing,
Right.
At some point, it's not going to require a publishing contract to get on a console, right? So like if the Steam console launches, that may change the game. An Apple console launches, that may change the game. And then Microsoft has to relent and say, wow, I mean, these guys have, 20 new games a week going in that are of good quality. I don't know how often Steam is getting new games, but much more often than XBLA. Right. And, there's constant sales and deals, and the publishers has all this control. And, it's well,
even next generation, PSN and XBLA may kind of look and say, we need some sort of middle category. We don't want to open it up to everyone, but we don't want to.
Yeah, you don't want an Xbox indie games. That's just anybody with $100 can throw any junk up there. It could even happen
next console cycle if there are no new consoles. So. Just because of the way the phone market and tablet market are going.
And in that instance, your traditional publishers like EA will have to change their roles, right?
Yes.
And then so like the definition of indie is not going to work anymore because they aren't a needed component, but it's not like I'm saying they're going to go away. It's not like EA and Activision are going to die overnight because digital publishing launches, but the services and what they do will have to change to... It will be interesting because they will have to become a value add service. And, it would be interesting to see, hey, I've got a game and EA, I would like you to market it. I would like a contract for marketing. I'm not paying you to publish the game. I am hiring you as marketing for my game. I would hire out you as a marketing service.
Yeah. We kind of discussed this when we were talking about Kickstarter in that, once that gets going, or even once indie gaming gets big and hits a certain... critical mass, like there's going to be something there's going to be some structure form that is not a publisher, but it's going to be like, what the publisher is in the current model. And yeah, you have to decide whether that's good or bad.
Yeah. So those are the news articles up. The topic tonight that we talked about a little bit. I'll just show you where it started. It started off of this Kickstarter that's ongoing right now, called Light Table. And this Kickstarter,
Hi, my name is...
it's got its volume on. This Kickstarter is essentially a new IDE, and the documentation portion is kind of boring. But when he gets into these sequences...
Actually, I thought the documentation part was kind of cool because... It makes me think of, I love editing in Vim, but I don't like not having IntelliSense, and,
yeah,
that could be a middle ground.
But to me, that wasn't as interesting or groundbreaking as the compiler or the interpreter is running as you write code and actively running your code in the window. So, I mean, this isn't going to come out in the video, but there'll be a link to this in our show notes. But here, so as he's typing in, like x equals 5 for... I equals X to blah, 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 whatever, he can see in the other window what that actually executes and becomes. He can see the values. And the notion and the idea comes out of some stuff that he mostly credits Brett Victor, who I'm not familiar with the name, but I've looked into his background a little bit. He's designed products and interfaces for Apple, and he's a pretty big name as far as interface design guy. And this isn't buffered, so I'm probably not going to be able to jump ahead here very far into his talk. But this is a great talk to go and watch, given in some horrible hotel, where he throws up different editor ideas. And Vimeo will let me jump far ahead. Okay.
No. There seems to be some problem with Vimeo, because I had that problem. I had to restart it, and I couldn't jump forward, and I was just like, okay, I'm done. I've seen half of it.
Yeah, either I just jumped to the same place twice, or I don't know what's going on. Because I'm trying to get up to where he's in some of the editors. But essentially, this is... let me pause it and let it buffer for a little bit. The idea that he's putting forth is that our tools need to show us in real time the effects of the code we are writing. And when that happens, you can be much more creative because you can see how changing this variable or adding this loop or adding this property or altering this value affects the game immediately, all right? You don't have to run, compile, and test. And then it allows you to actually play with these values, and that leads to creative ideas in gameplay. There's a moment where he actually shows you this scenario of Braid, like a real-time writing the game Braid and how that could, do on there, and then sort of links it to V, with the gravity mechanic, simply by altering his values at runtime and doing things you would probably never do because you're not going to waste the effort on debugging and figuring out what's going on, but like setting your gravity to negative values and watching what happens when that, to the world, and that giving you ideas of places to go.
It's neat. It's the type of thing that I look at and think that if you want this to happen, like, you aren't necessarily going to be able to. There's not necessarily going to be a software package that gives you everything you need to do this. Like, it's going to have to be something where it's extensible, because a lot of this is dependent on context. Like, the time slider he had.
Yeah. So I think you have to also step back, though, and part of his talk, the second half of his talk, is to not allow practicality block you, because you have to go and create something that has never been created before, right? So, it's like the first guy to create a programmable computer, right? That's never existed. And so people like, or a programming language, when you were coming off of punch cards, like there was a lot of, like, I'm sorry, that's just not going to be possible to, map all these things. You got to handle these cases, but it's like, you have to be unwilling to accept that answer and plow through it and come out on the other end and realize, I'm trying to create something new, and the only way I'm going to do that is to shatter this, go for it, and not accept a compromise here.
And it's going to have
as long as, and he talks about this in the second half too, you understand your goal. And his goal is to remove a roadblock he sees, and the roadblock is horrible tooling that doesn't show you your changes in real time. So his goal is to show you your changes in real time, and then that can give you some wiggle room in like your actual implementation, because he's like, well, I'm still showing you changes in real time, but you kind of have to do this extra thing to see that, or load this, or run this environment, or I'm not giving you everything, or I give you some things. But, he shows, writing a platformer, and he's got the guy up and running, and he's changing code while the game's running. He's changing, the effect of the jump and how you jump on a turtle, and adding the ability to jump on the turtle and what happens afterwards, controlling it. And then he even has, this is where the braid bit comes in. He has this great moment in the video where he shows you, okay, here I got a little bit of, this is him doing some work here in the code section, right? So he's working in JavaScript on this tree, and all this code does is draw this tree, and now he can go into his code, and as he changes the value, the height, branches to the tree, he plays with it and gets kind of crazy, because it's like, well, when you get this ability to go in here and turn things on and off and try things out, you just kind of play with it for a while, and you may get to a point where you get an entirely new idea from screwing around with these values, and that's the roadblock he sees. He sees the tooling forcing you to wait so long between the time you code it to the time you see it. You have to, in your head, imagine what the computer's going to do. And the ability for you to be a good developer and write code is your ability to simulate the computer in your head as far as what it's going to do. As time goes on, you work harder, you get better at it. It's a huge barrier, and if you're really good at it, you're not going to see some things that you might have seen otherwise.
Especially with stuff like graphics. Like we said, I think I talked about this last week. Like, as a business developer, you have a more limited set of variables that change more slowly. They go through a set of states, whereas, like the tree example and the platformer example, they're changing there are all kinds of in-between steps that you have to see.
And I think, his demos are obviously set. I mean, he ran real demos, but this is kind of where Lightbox came out of like, hey, we got to get closer to that. So, right now he's playing with the turtle. He added a walk routine to the turtle, played with the speed until he got the speed setting to where he liked. I know that alone. Like, some of the things that I would love most out of this are kind of some of the smallest. Just the playing with the values, playing with the hard-coded values and runtime. Like, we go through a lot of effort to set up a console so that we can edit and change a value at runtime. The way he's just, doing it to a drag while he's still writing the code, I would love to have that. If I got nothing else, I mean, that's a lot of the playtesting and balance. It's just trying to find that moment. And there's a great bit in here as he's jumping around and playing around with it. See if I can just fast forward to when he does the time thing. Yeah. So here, he puts in this ability to where he can actually pause the running game. And when he pauses the running game here, he gets this time slider at the top to where he can see every frame that came before the point in time he's at, and then he can scrub back and forth where he's in the frame, and then this is really cool. He goes in and changes the value and can see now how that would affect what would have happened now, like once he's got that loaded up. And then he can get the jump to set exactly the way he wants his jump set. And, I mean, all of that done in once. And again, he is the visionary. He is the uncompromising guy. Light Table that we talked about there, the Kickstarter, is sort of like the beginnings of an open source, pragmatic implementation of this. Watching the stuff he does, like, I really want to, like, okay, I see what you're doing. I want to go start building these tools. Like, you've inspired me to shut down and build these tools instead of, working on our game. The game will never get done if I...
But actually, I think that's what a tool like this has to be. Like, you can have a program like Light Table that takes you part of the way there for the most common use cases, and then some sort of extensibility where you can go in and write your own tooling without having to write your own tooling from the ground up and tailor it to the specific things you need. And that way you get some of that, but you don't like spend all your time reinventing the wheel.
Right. He talks about, there's like a reference to Vim basically and terminal emulation and all of that, and all of the Vim and the edit mode type stuff that's in Vim and all that come from these actual like typewriter-like computers where you would type something and then the computer would type something back at you. And how much of our current modern IDEs are stuck in paradigms that were created because of those physical limitations. And he's like, we have the CPU to do this stuff in real time now, guys. It's no longer an excuse of computing power, and we're not moving in that direction. Like, what the fuck is Visual Studio 11 doing? They're fucking around with like colors and whether we make uppercase titles and shit like that. And it's like, what are you doing to move the IDE forward, right? Because at one time, Visual Studio was very progressive. IntelliSense was coming out and just, having the ability to have inline documentation popping up and auto-completing functions and things like that. I mean, that was very progressive. And Visual Studio had a lot of that stuff before others. And there was backlash against that. One of my favorite authors, Charles Petzold, had an entire rant on Visual Studio rots the mind because he believed that having all that at your fingertips means programmers were not grabbing reference manuals and just studying the API books and knowing, right? Like when you work in Vim, you have to know your framework a lot better than you do in Visual Studio because you can kind of explore. But the flip side of that, and I think why in this one case my idol is wrong, is that it has allowed, like, the Visual Studio framework is fucking huge. Like, there's no way you could understand that entire frame space, the namespaces and everything that's in .NET, right?
It depends.
But you can know some areas really well, but when you kind of get into some areas you don't need to know too well, you can just call up File, hit dot, and kind of explore your way through the menu, And like, I need to make a file. There's a file.create method. Oh, what are the parameters to that? Hey, that looks like what I want. That has a read-only creation flag, parameter that I can pass in. That's exactly what I want. And not have to go to the manual, look up the enumerations for, in a file type enumeration like you had to do back in the Win32 days. None of that,
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it, though, again, this is kind of where there's a middle ground. I don't think IDEs, like, I compare, when I was writing Python, doing web development, like, I love that, but I was dealing with the same, math string, those sort of functions all the time, where you pretty much could learn them if you use them enough.
Well,
that was good.
That was true of the basic of Python, but Python shipped with a lot of modules,
right.
And knowing what all those did.
Well, but that's my point. Like, you'd go in and you'd kind of know the ones you needed to use over
right, and you would learn those that you use over and over.
Right.
But just being able to, hey, I need to make an image, and I never make an image. What module do I even, you'd have to go out, find external reference material.
That's kind of...
Look up the, now Python was kind of an early forerunner, though, of the blend, because in Python, you could query any object, and you could run an interactive IDE that allowed you to enter code and see the exact output and modify it while running in memory.
Right.
And then any object could be interrogatable. So it's not a clean example in that case, because they were kind of moving to this,
in a sense, it accomplishes the same goal as IntelliSense.
Yeah, it was working that same way.
But I didn't use that as much. But the thing about IntelliSense, there is part of me that would rather work that way, where I am working from memory, where, I know the framework. But on the other hand, like, I'm doing stuff like XNA and SharePoint, where there's this stuff that I really don't know how it works because it's complicated. If you're talking about, like, the graphics stuff in XNA, where, you just, you want to go in there and poke around and, okay, what does this do? What does this do? What other signatures do I have for this method? Maybe there's one that works better.
Right.
So I think it goes either way with something like this as well. The thing is, Visual Studio isn't doing anything that's crazy and progressive, but a lot of times those things get built as plugins by other companies, and then eventually, unit testing is a good example. Eventually, it starts getting rolled in.
But yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's where my knock against Microsoft is that the visionary leads that they had in Visual Studio back in the day are no longer there, and now they're much more reactive. And then you get lost in places like, what should the color and the skin look like, rather than, are you moving my tool set forward? Because even in 2008 to 2010, somewhat, like, they introduced Blend, so you had the XAML markup layer, you had SketchFlow, these things were not great implementations, and I don't think they got widespread adoption, but they were, trying to make things easier, trying to solve the problem of designer and developer, work in silos, and trying to unify that, and props to that. It wasn't a great implementation, but props to trying to solve the problem and do something. Whereas now I just really feel like there's nothing new in VS11 I care about. Well,
yeah, and I think naturally, given the state Visual Studio's in now, you're not going to see them experimenting with stuff like Light Table and with this video, because that's going to take some evolution. There's going to have to be, does this implementation work? Does this implementation work? And eventually,
now he already has screenshots of Light Studio up working while running a game.
Right. I don't mean in terms of does it technically work, but what do people latch on to? If you look at Eclipse and Visual Studio, they have different ways of doing the same thing. You're probably going to get some of that before people kind of
but they have different ways
of
doing the same thing, but does either one necessarily have an approach that is so different that results in a massive explosion of creativity by its users?
No, I don't think they're so different.
They're like 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Oh yeah, but my point is, I think you're going to have to see a lot of evolution before that ends up getting, and then whatever comes of that evolution is what will end up in Visual Studio.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if they're paying attention to this, and by the time that they wake
I think
up,
they will be. I mean,
well, again, the reason I say maybe is because it's becoming less and less important to be in Visual Studio with iPads and iOS everywhere and Unity and frameworks like that, for game dev at least.
yeah.
That by the time they catch up, are you even relevant? You know. So more tools here. So we recently discovered. I discovered this tool, Spriter. It was a Kickstarter that ended last week. I missed it because it was in the games section, not the video games section. And essentially, what it allows you to do is drag and drop different sprites and composite a full image or character from those sprites on there, and then apply animations to it, and then it saves it in a nice XML format so that you can run that in game. It's in a beta state right now. Not a whole lot of features, but it does have enough that it is usable. I was looking for the video, but I don't see that link up top.
Page.
Yeah, it might be on the Kickstarter page. So, I mean, there's some things, and they kickstarted it to add a whole bunch of features and just to have like a massive, like, hey, we want to, buy it now, pre-order it now, and we want to do this massive run at all these features like tweening support and, tweaking everything down and deformation so that you can bring in vector level art and then reform that art in the animation. The big push behind this, on their stuff is that you're seeing the exact animation, the exact way the developer's going to run it.
Right.
The guys behind it have a lot of experience in video games and development, and the designers are kind of, the designer that's working on it too with him is a very good in-between designer. Like, he's written code and done the design, so he kind of understands the needs of both, and he's trying to make a universal tool. And he's like, some of these tools exist, but they don't exist publicly. They exist as tools inside of a studio or something you can't take with you. And so he's wanting to have something you can get. Right now, you can go pre-order it for $25. You can get the beta for free. You can pre-order for $25, which I went ahead and did. I missed the Kickstarter, but you can still go in there and pay $25, and then when it releases, you'll get it. And I just, like what they're doing and where they're at, and would have Kickstarted them if I hadn't missed it. And they were crazy successful too. I think they were asked for $20,000 to get to this next major feature set milestone, and they ended up with like $75,000. So that is definitely worth checking out. And again, this is so you could do, this would be your composite style animations to where, the arms are one sprite, the chest is another sprite, the head's another sprite, the legs are separate sprites, and that each one of these gets animated separately to create the animation of walking. Yeah. That would be when you would use this tool. Although, looking at it, it seems flexible enough, like if you want to do a cutscene in it. I don't know if they're in there right now, but they have talked about 2 audio cue points and audio track syncing, so that, if you wanted to do a cutscene and sync it with cue and dialogue and that kind of stuff, you could. Plus, they also mentioned like metadata points as well. So if you want custom points for your particular game, you could use. There are importers on this thing written for just about every game dev language. They had like 12 or so contributed during their Kickstarter. That's how easy it is to fold in that. So that's on brashmonkey.com, and that is Spriter. The next one I have listed is Tiled Map Editor, and we've talked about this a few times before, but we are fans of this. We use this quite a bit for our stuff and our games, and this is a really nice, simple to use tiled map editor. So, I mean, you can do this as a top-down map. You can do it in an orthographic layout. You can also do, a 2D platformer is the same. They don't have one up a photo of, there we go. So, there's a map. I guess they ported this for iPad. Okay. There's a map editor for iPad on it yet, so I wonder if that's I have to check into that. Anyway, yeah, so you can pretty much use any kind of tile-based system with the tiled map editor. Nick Gravelin put out a C# importer. So if you're using XNA, you can import it. It has a couple other importers for a couple other popular languages. But if you're into the 2D world, I think it's a really excellent tool. It allows you to, of course, lay out the tiles. You can do them in multiple layers. So you could have like background on one, platforms on the other, so you can easily do your collision detection against one versus the other. You can also have object layers, which aren't necessarily tiles. They're kind of sprites. So if like you want to do enemy placement, that'd be a good use of that.
They're kind of regions. I mean, you can kind of use them for that.
Well, then they also have regions as well. So the sprite objects tie to a sprite image still on your tile sheet, but the other version or the other thing you have in those layers, the regions, are rectangles that you can draw bound to the tile or not to mark different areas. And in fact, when we've talked about the dubstep camera, we're using regions in tiled to mark where the camera can go in Captain Dubstep.
In fact, like the enemies, I added you draw out a region where the enemy will move. And then this will actually support just custom properties. So, movement is horizontal. The player can ride this enemy true,
Right.
Add in a lot of extra stuff.
And, it's free and it's pretty easy to grok once you get it set up and going and play with it for a little bit. So, it's a perfect kind of tool that you can give to somebody else to build out the level design, and not have to worry about a whole bunch of work after you get the levels from the designer. You can just drop in a tiled map format and be good. All right, next one. So the next couple that I've got up here, I'm gonna reorder these guys a bit. So the next one I'm going to talk about here is Tile Studio. Now, we've played with this, and by that I mean download it, load it up, click around a little bit, check it out. Tile Studio, also open source, also free, allows you to not only lay out a map, tile layer, but you can actually do some pixel editing as well. We don't know about the importers and everything like this. This looks like it might be a little bit more powerful than tiled map editor. I can't really compare and contrast because we haven't gotten deep into them, but the idea that you could just use the drawing tool to quickly edit a tile on your tile sheet seems pretty powerful. I have multiple applications open up and edit the tile sheet in one, and then tab back in and use it. Now, tiled map editor reflected changes in the tile sheet immediately, so it kind of detected that, hey, the tile sheet got updated. So I don't know that not having the editor is a detriment, because it didn't I still had that same workflow. Right. But it's an alternative to check out. Okay, I talked about animations, and I should have had this one following it. Graphics Gale. We talked about using Spriter to do kind of almost a vector style animation of the sprites, where sprites are object, and you scale and tweak and rotate them per frame. Graphics Gale is the other approach, which is a pixel by pixel editor per frame. So this is your classic, your retro style art. Now it does have layers and things like that, and onion skinning. There is a free version. I think it doesn't cost that much if you want to buy it. I want to say it's in the $15 to $25 range. But there is a free version that you can click around the site and download. Let me just find out here real quick what the purchased version is. Okay. 1,995 yen. Cicely, what is that in USD?
I hate you.
There's something called Google.
It sent me to a currency converter. That's not the right.
Pretty sure you just
right number of yen to USD, and usually Google will do it for you.
I was gonna say this may indicate
It's $25.
buying it is
$25. There you go.
complicated.
So yeah, it wasn't. As I said, not much, not a whole lot there. But I've used this. I've used this not only to do animations, but also lay out sprite sheets. So if you have all your sprites kind of as individual graphic files, and you need to get them to one tile sheet. This will kind of be a wasteful tool for this because it will lay them out. Every tile gets a full size. So if you do 128 by 128 tiles, then every image is a 128 by 128 tile. But if you just want to copy and paste a bunch of things, I've done that as animation frames. And then when you export, you can say, hey, I want you to export this whole thing and do it as 4x4, 4 tiles, 4 rows or whatever, 4 columns, and then figure out how many rows you've got or something like that. So it's handy in that respect as well. Let's see. I clicked away too many windows. Okay. So now we're getting into non-gaming tools here, but useful nonetheless. Paint.net is a really excellent free paint image manipulation program. Its comparison is to Photoshop, but Photoshop has way more features. I mean, this has layers, and some effects and filters and things like that. But it is basic in that sense, but for the kind of artwork that you're going to be doing for graphics, especially if you're doing pixel art, it's really good for this. And I've actually seen Notch use this. Notch did a game weekend contest, and I just kind of watched his live stream of him working, and he was creating some sprite sheets just by hand using Paint.net. It's my go-to editor. It's my first, basically it replaces Windows Paint, and MS Paint, as my first stop.
I tend to use GIMP, so I'm not as familiar with.
I think if you know GIMP, you're probably fine. Okay. Same kind of overlap. But if you've not used GIMP, I think GIMP is a little daunting.
Yes.
To get into.
Well, it's basically built to be a Photoshop replacement.
Yeah, and with a wonderful open source interface UI. Yes. And
it's gotten better.
It has gotten better.
Much better.
But Paint.net is very approachable. So if GIMP seems daunting or something, Paint.net.
Is there anything that makes this better for doing sprite sheets? Like you get like a pixel grid or something?
No, you still don't really get like grids and stuff that you can overlay in there. I actually saw Notch solve this. He made a grid and used it as a layer. So he went ahead and calculated out what grid he wanted and then made it as a layer. And I'm like, wow, I feel really fucking lazy for complaining about that because look how easy he did that.
You can do a lot with layers. But yeah.
Next one here we're going to talk about is Inkscape. And I'll just link here to the image, maybe. There it goes, come up. To the homepage. Yeah, here's some screenshots of Inkscape. So Inkscape is a vector art program, all right? So it's not really, it's not set to edit at the pixel level. It's more set to do vectors, which of course, scale well to whatever resolution you want them at. So, for your higher art games, this is where you want to go. It is also an open source free program. Been around for over a decade, I think, at this point. I mean, it's been around forever.
I don't know. I don't think it's as old as GIMP is.
It's pretty damn old.
Yeah, it's been around for a while.
So, I mean, it's pretty up and a lot of features to the program have been worked in. You can do some really good work in that as well if you know what you're doing. I don't know what I'm doing, so I'll never make something look like this in an art program.
Yeah, I don't understand how you get a vector to that. Everything I do that is a vector clearly looks like it is a vector.
Clearly, yeah, it's clearly vector art, but
I have done posters in this. I've done stuff that I've put on Vistaprint. I've done all kinds of other things. So
and it's great for those kind of things because you really need vector art for that to scale up to a resolution that will look good on a shirt or a poster.
Yeah.
This would
or even scale down.
replace fireworks if you're a fireworks user and you were looking for something to replace that. That'd be the similar type of tool. Also, Adobe Illustrator would be in the same category of tools that you might use for this. That wraps up the tools that we were going to mention on this show. Of course, we'll probably have more tool shows in the future. Now, before we get into the Kickstarter, I wanted to give a shout out to Z-Boy Games. I don't remember if I did last year, but he does a weekly Kickstarter report. And in this week's report, he takes a pretty hard look at Legend of the Time Star as a bad example. And he basically says, here you have a nice 2D scrolling action RPG, lots of concept art, and one decent scroll far. So, concept art and screenshots. One major problem, the game is listed as December 2014. And, he's looking at that of like, that is a crazy deadline for a Kickstarter. Like, even Tim Schafer's not that far out. And he's thinking for that. I went back and actually looked at this one. They don't have gameplay up. That's why I never talked about it. That was just one of them. Like, there's no real gameplay. You've got some concept art, but anybody can do concept art. I want to see that you're dedicated enough that you've spent some hours in your free time putting this together. Right. And on that tact, I want to talk a little bit about the Kickstartering and Screaming article that Indie Gamer Chick wrote. And she basically is getting inundated with requests to talk about Kickstarters on her site, and has no desire really to do so. And in her style, she's going to go off. But then she also provides some guidelines to these developers. And the first one and the second one, I think I'm going to say don't matter so much. The first one is have a track record to prove you have the talent needed to make the game. I think if you show your game demo, if you show an up and running something game that is representative of where you're going, you don't need to have a track record, okay? You need to show something. If you're Tim Schafer, you can get away with showing nothing, but you're not, okay? So I think you need to show gameplay, and by showing gameplay at some stage or some piece of it, you can kind of dissuade do you have the ability to finish this? Can you do that? The second one is explain why you need the money, and I said, I don't even think that's a good advice point to talk about money or even mention reward tiers, explicitly. Like, they're over on the side, people can see them. Why do you need money? You need money to make the game. Don't explain why you need to hire a graphic artist. And she talks about, like, having quotes for how much it's going to cost and be done. I mean, you need to do the budget planning to know how much money you need to get where you want to go. But don't, because, okay, the truth of game development is all the money goes to pay people.
Yes.
There are not physical goods required to be purchased. There's a couple of licensing, but, you can take care of that in a couple $1,000s. Yes.
With a couple $1,000s.
Exactly. And you can always find tools like we've talked about that are cheaper.
You see a lot of Kickstarter projects that do that. Like, they are just buying the license. It's not much. Like, I see your point, because if you go any higher than that and you're paying people,
right? And she talks about on that. In her point number 3, prove you have the discipline necessary to use Kickstarter wisely. This ties in with I expect to see a demo. By the time you come to Kickstarter, I expect to see concept art and demo and a fairly involved effort into the project. But she mentions one guy looking for a $2,000 probably license to some software to finish his game, tweeting about a surfboard that he was looking at getting that cost around $2,000. Yeah, and it's like, okay, so why am I paying you $2,000 for this? Now, the exception I'm going to take with the overall tone of points 1, 2, and 3 is the implied vibe that you are somehow donating to start a company, and you're not. You're pre-selling your game. If people are looking for a return on their investment, and that comes from the reward tier. So everybody looks at your game. If they get interested by your video, if you successfully have interest from your video, then the first thing they do is they go over the column and they start scanning that list to see at what level will I get something back that feels like that was worth my money. And, you know, the game for $10 or $15, that's the price of the game. So they're not really kickstarting a company here. They're just paying for the game. And I think you need to look at it that way. Consumers may or may not. Consumers may look at it sometimes as like, hey, I'm helping this company get started, which is okay, but I think the mass majority are not looking at it that way.
Well, if you're looking to buy licenses and that sort of thing, then you are kind of providing that frame, you know, the groundwork for a company. And also, if a person is successful, you are implicitly kind of, you know, laying that groundwork for a company, but you're not directly, you know, explicitly giving. So
exactly. So don't talk to it. I mean, it's a cost of doing business. It's how games are made. You have to pay rent. You have to, I mean, she talks in there of like, I don't want to hear the story of like how you have to quit your day job. You know, the money lets you quit your day job. If you quit your day job, you win a game. Well, you know what? That's fucking true. You want a game, they have to quit their day job. If you want a decent game, it is very hard to make that in the after hours, okay? Yeah. I mean, especially like all the stuff that she rants on the site, it's like, you want higher quality, that needs to be a full-time gig, okay? It's not going to happen otherwise. And yeah, that's the kind of the idea of Kickstarter. I am kickstarting a dream choice. If I put Captain Dubstep on there and we can get to, you know, a $200,000 level, then we can look at quitting day jobs and work on the game. If we kickstart it and we get $50,000,
that's not
we can hire some voice actors and get some music done and maybe hire, you know, some other pieces, but we're going to write it after work, after hours still. That's not enough. Like, maybe I'll just see if I can take a month off work without pay. You know, you guys let me go for a month without pay and I can come back in a month and work that out, you know? Or like I'll break my leg and take FMLA or something, Family Medical Leave Act. I shouldn't say that on air. Yeah, I shouldn't really say that in this situation.
If you are willing to break your leg so that you can write a game, you have a mental problem.
Well, your leg will heal. Like your leg will come back.
No.
It's not permanent damage.
I'm with Dylan.
No, this is like severe psychological issues. Like,
especially if you do
cat lady.
If you do like a clean break, like it'll heal perfectly.
I don't care. Wait, no. That's
like
assuming a lot.
Like the thing is, you don't want to shatter it. Don't hit your leg with like a baseball bat.
You have to be an expert in breaking legs.
The way you want to do it. Are you going to
experiment on your cats
the
just
way,
to make sure? Like,
well, my brother has broken his leg in the proper way, and the way you want to do that is
you've done it
to have force come up the leg. So from the bottom of your foot up. Like, you don't want to hit the shaft and on, you know, like a femur bone or something like that and risk shattering it, okay? You want to, like, hit it from the bottom so it just kind of, like, snaps in half clean, right? Because then that'll mend up well. You don't have any bone fragments to pull out. They just set the cast and you're good. And then you have, you know, while you're laid up in traction, you're on morphine. Tell me that you wouldn't write some awesome game code shit, ideas wouldn't come out of it, of like while you're on a morphine drip.
I would write code that I thought compiled, but didn't. Like, I would see what it did, and when I came out of it, I would find out that it isn't even
really, on the scale of like, one moment causes X amount of repercussion.
Yes.
You break a leg, you heal for a few months. You know, okay? You forget to use a condom, you raise a kid for 18 years. So, it doesn't seem that bad of a consequence for a moment of stupidity.
But that...
You know, and reckless abandon.
That's not a comparison. That's like... like, this is like reverse Godwin or something. Like, well, you know, at least I'm not Hitler. You know?
Well,
I may have killed a hobo.
I'm not convinced. I'm not seeing the downsides here.
I've got a suggestion. You go to your local mental health professional. You tell them this plan. They're going to put you in a mental hospital.
I think
see if you can bring your laptop.
I think that talking to the medical professionalist about it may prove the case so that FMLA by the company doesn't actually have to be paid. Because like if you premeditate, they don't have to pay you for that.
No,
that's insurance fraud. If
you premeditate that and you literally think this is a good idea and you don't see the problem, you don't see what's wrong with that, they might want to put you in a safe place where you cannot hurt yourself or others.
We need to get to point 4. Point 4, when writing your Kickstarter pitch, at least pretend you give a shit. And I cannot agree more.
Yeah.
The one I tweeted earlier in the day, they didn't even talk about the game. No video, no screenshots, no drafting. Just that I'm working on something.
Martial arts training.
Yeah, that was the pledge levels. Pledge levels, like you get the game. You may get to have like a character in the game or something. And then like at the higher levels, I will train you in martial arts. What the fuck? Yeah. That is awful. And you know what? It's its spelling, it's grammar, it's a well-written opening, it's a well-shot, produced video. If you just get on your couch and joke around with your friends, it looks like shit, man. You're not getting funded. The amount of shit noise has gone way up on GameMarx or on Kickstarter. So but the thing is that I still see the ones that just kind of follow the simple rules. When I check them out, like, oh, they want $18,000, and it's the second day, and they're up to like 2,000, 3,000. I'm like, oh, they're getting traction. People are responding to that. So still going and successful, but man, the junk. Don't make a pitch sound like a threat. This is just really a variant on a video where somebody's like, if I need this money to make this game. If I don't get this money, this game doesn't happen. Now, I think Kickstarter is an excellent idea for you to throw up a $20,000 Kickstarter with your game idea, and you get a little test prototype to see if there's a market for your game. I think that's a valid use of Kickstarter. But don't tell people that's what you're doing, right? If it gets funded, you make the game. If it doesn't get funded, everybody gets their money back, and nobody gives a shit if you made the game or not. Right?
Yeah.
So if you have some really good ideas, but you're kind of curious if they'll be successful or not, Kickstarter can vet them for you because it is pre-sales. And if you can't get some Kickstarter traction going, then don't bother investing in the game. But for the love of God, don't tell people you're manipulating them. They don't like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, if someone flat out said, like, if this doesn't get funded, then I can't make this game, for 99.99% of game ideas, I'm going to be like, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Like
your
your
first-person
so
brown and
special,
bloom shooter. Yes, I don't give a shit. And then her last
how
one
many
is
games are out there.
Her last one is do something original, and I'm gonna add to this a little bit of originality in that you need to, if you're not 100% original, if you're a retro throwback, then you need to make sure you're retro throwback in a way that is popular and is getting funded to some extent. And that is, like if you're retro throwback to a JRPG, those seem to get traction, but make sure you're selling on your story because that's your original component.
Yeah. Anyone can come up with a JRPG tile set and make a JRPG.
You can go download RPG Maker. And
yeah, exactly.
I have seen those on there now. I'm like, that's fucking RPG Maker. And so you made a video off of RPG Maker to dupe some people into thinking that you have game skills, but I can tell you have no story to talk about yet. So, yeah, I'm not interested. The other thing is this is again where the experimentation comes in, but if you do have some crazy ideas, kickstart that game. If you want to say, like, what happens if I make all death permadeath in my game? Okay, it's an interesting idea. Don't know if it's going to sell. Kickstart, see where it goes. See if people will fork over $10 to play a game that is permadeath, on that. So with all that said, let's talk about some Kickstarters. Now, first, I have up to some weird shit that I came across because I'm on Kickstarter. Number 1, old people eating eggs in 3D. No, this is not a game. This is a guy who wants to make YouTube films of old people eating eggs in 3D. basically there's not enough 3D content on YouTube, and he wants to make stupid YouTube content in 3D. This one has a $1,000 pledge on it. It's asking for $2,000 because they want to buy the camera, and you can get a chuckle out of watching the video. Like, it is like, oh, okay, this is kind of funny. You know, these guys kind of have some repertoire going here, and I get the joke, right? But when you scroll down and you see there's a $1,000 backer, and when I first saw this, it was like funded at $1,200 with $1,000 of it coming there. It looks like $1,200 out of $2,000 looks like, hey, this is going to be successful. This is going. But then you see that $1,000 backer, and you're like, is that them backing their own project, and do they plan to pull it towards the end?
Doesn't get funded.
Well, no. Once funding has crossed $3,000, they can pull out $1,000. No one will ever notice if they do it at the last minute. Also, they can just raise funding and then pull out $1,000 and pledge $200 to get the money out, you know. So are they manipulating their own Kickstarter for that? The other one that is not video game related, Confessions of a High-Priced Call Girl reprint drive. So she already had a book published called Confessions of a High-Priced Call Girl, and now she wants to do another run of the book. And to do another run of the book, she wants to get money to print the book.
Why not do an ebook at that point?
Yeah,
because like, okay, first run, yeah, but
I find it funny that some of the reward levels include naked photos of her. That's a reward tier that you could get, but the backing is $0 pledged of $12,000. And I think I told you right before the podcast. So apparently you can be a whore, but you can't whore out being a whore. That we don't respond well to.
Well, again, like I said, you don't want that to end up on your Kickstarter profile. Like,
correct. Your backing projects are public, so that may be part of it too. Is nobody wants to be seen backing the Call Girl book.
And remember what I said about like independent projects having that ethical weight to them, and this maybe not so much.
All right, Kickstarter this week. What caught my eye here? The first one up is kind of the token, hey, this is a guy not asking for much money, probably to cover some licenses and, you know, maybe get some help with the art type thing. I don't think he went into directly what he's talking about, but it's a top-down shooter, scrolling shooter, and he's asking for $2,500 total. So, I mean, well, within the range of a humble asking, I think. Has a good video up of gameplay and talks over it, basically. So I'm just really kind of giving a nod. Nothing really special about that one on its own, other than, you know, it's like, hey, it's a very reasonable request. This one, this game doesn't have any gameplay up. It does actually have. I chuckled a little bit at the video. But the idea is to play Angry Birds and mash it up with Twitter data. So use Twitter and play Angry Birds with tweets or something.
I don't know how that works.
That makes my brain hurt.
Lost interest in his video when they stopped the humor part about 3 or 4 minutes in and started explaining, and they're trying to set up this crazy social media background and all that, and I kind of fell asleep and forgot how the game actually is going to work, and didn't care to read it after that point. But I thought that was just props for an idea. You know, I mean, I've seen some really bad things getting kickstarted.
Interwebs, social media, Angry Birds.
This one I think is just straight up wrong. Cheech and Chong's animated adventure game. These guys made a Cheech and Chong Facebook game. Okay? Licensed. And they're licensed to make...
Did you just growl?
No, that wasn't a growl. That was my what's Marge's sister's name? Velma?
Yeah. They are licensed to make a iPhone game, I think is where they're going with this next one. And they want to bring it to the iPhone. But here's the thing. It's like, you know, we're licensed and supported by Cheech and Chong. So if you're licensed and kind of backed, you shouldn't be on Kickstarter. Like, that seems generally wrong. To me,
Unless
it seems a little. Wait, why are you guys asking for? Is this just so you don't have to pay the development costs?
Yeah, I was gonna
Because
say,
they talk about how the game is also going to be a tie-in with the Cheech and Chong's animated movie that's coming out.
okay, so that's not something that they have to buy the license for.
This feels like, hey, we need a marketing iPhone game, and we're going to hire this studio to make our marketing iPhone game that made the marketing marketing Facebook game, and I don't like seeing that on Kickstarter, because it's like the people who are making the animated film should be covering promotional games and stuff like that, not people who are gonna, potentially buy the game, because it's like you really should make that free anyway to promote the movie. Next game here, Skyjacker. This reminded me a lot. In fact, I actually kind of dig around just to make sure it wasn't the indie shooter that I played a lot of, Solar Struggle Survival.
Right.
It kind of looked like that a little bit, and it seemed to have more 3D control. You weren't locked in a 2D plane, but it looked really interesting as a shooter, as a space shooter. Now, they want $200,000. I'm not sure what that's doing for the game. Okay?
Considering it almost seems like that breaks our some of the rules we talked about, like have gameplay footage, but if you have so much gameplay footage that you don't seem like you need the money, then
right.
And don't talk about what you're going to use the money for, but if you're asking for so much,
if you're asking for an insane amount, if you're asking for hundreds of thousands of dollars, then there kind of needs to be a lot behind the game design that's not there. Like this is an MMO space game.
I was going to say, the thing is, these are not necessarily hard and fast rules so much as they are like a gut, But yeah.
Next one is kind of an interesting idea. I don't see it getting funded, but this isn't an actual game. This is a little environment where you can go in, and there's a scene finally at the end. There we go. Where you kind of build like dialogue trees and build the dialogue and storytelling options of a game without actually doing any coding. So it's a interesting toolkit and framework that they're trying to build, but I don't know that it looks good enough to be something that people are going to want. And I don't even know that people need that. Here's an interesting idea. At least somebody's trying to think of stuff with the Kinect. So this is a 3D biology video game for the Kinect, and they're a Kinect PC. They don't have any announcements. I couldn't find anything where they said, like, we're coming to Xbox, because I always hate when I see that on a Kickstarter, and it's like, well, do you already have a deal? And if you already have a deal, why are you on Kickstarter?
Yeah.
Right? Your publisher should be funding that if you sign a publishing agreement. But essentially, this is, go inside the body and, explore different things and repair DNA strands. Where's the shot? Yeah, where's the... they have, like, the fit... Yeah, so there she's actually, like, circling her arm to wrap DNA with some strands or something. So, I mean, when I actually saw the gameplay, I was like, oh... Okay, well, I don't see why you have that. But then again, all the industry is doing is more stupid Dance Central clones and a dumbass dribble a basketball game that's going to go nowhere. So at least somebody is doing something interesting with Kinect.
Oh, and the interesting thing is that's kind of an educational game that, that's not going to hit the target Xbox Kinect market, but it's still an interesting use of the peripheral.
Now, Kinetic Void, I marked this one because basically you can kind of in-game design your ships. and, you know, outfit them how you want and go around. And it looks to have like a kind of economy type thing happening to it as well, and trading aspect as well as the combat and things like that. So pretty ambitious design. Looking for 60,000 on that one. So it's already got 7,000. It may actually hit. That may actually be done. The graphics are rougher than I hope the final version is. But maybe that's, you know, maybe that's part of the plan, is to increase the graphics and the textures of the models. But, you know, I loved Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, right? I love that game where you could create your own vehicles, right? And that how you outfitted it affected how it played in game. So if that happens on this one, I think that's a good game. Dylan, how do you feel about this one? This one should have been up in the
I've not seen it before. What is it?
On Kolos,
On Kolos?
a multiplayer game for cancer patients. I won't bother playing the video because there's no video. There's a bunch of guys talking.
So what is the game, and why is it for cancer
I
patients?
didn't see any gameplay. There's no talk of the game. There's no talk of actually what the game would be. Basically, they just want a social environment for cancer patients to go and be able to hang out and talk with other cancer patients, and maybe their family gets involved as well.
It's called a help desk.
Help?
No, it's
Oh, you mean like
like,
a hospital? Or...
I don't think cancer patients want to play a game about cancer with cancer patients that constantly remind them of cancer. I think if the cancer patients want to play a social game to, you know, get away from it all, it's called World of Warcraft. I mean,
back in the day, back when I was in the hospital, they had like the little carts with the N64s on them.
oh,
you can try to play those with an IV in your hand. It won't be easy, but
I played some MMOs through some of my treatments.
yeah.
That's kind of where I went, and you know, some of the people I played with, I just like, yeah, I just had treatment this morning, and you know, probably gonna pass out in about an hour or so. But you know, until then, like, I'm online. If you see me online past an hour, I'm sleeping at the keyboard. So
Please don't raid me.
I'll be honest. I don't want to like. I mean, you're kind of like making fun of the idea, or not really.
well, and that's all they have. All they have is exactly what I said. Like, if you go read this stuff about the project, is like, we just want to create this environment for people to go talk about cancer in the game.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't want to pass too much judgment on it, because I mean they're trying to do something good, but I don't know, like, and you know, if you're on treatment, you can't get out usually, but I don't know, yeah, like, you want either normalcy or you want to talk to other people at the hospital or whatever, you know.
The next one I have up is Cross of the Dutchman. Now, this guy does a horrible job of constantly splicing himself in the video when you really want to see the art assets and the cutscene. This will be an action RPG, heavily story-driven, it looks like. And, you know, it's got a lot of art, and he really has a heavy backstory set up, and you know, this kind of Viking era, wrong, you know, people taking his lives and Braveheart style setting going on. It looks really interesting, and the possibility looks really great. He also did something in his Kickstarter I thought was genius. He put an animated GIF down lower of some of the gameplay of the guy walking, and it's like, you don't have to click the video to play, so anybody that hits a page can't help but see a little bit of gameplay going, you know? And I think that's a really nice touch.
And you don't have to worry about, like, the intro to the video. You aren't compromising your, you know, cinematics. But,
exactly. If you wanted a high-produced thing, I think that looked...
That's a pretty awesome idea.
That is a good idea to do. Next one up here is Omega Sector. And I put this one in because... I'm not remembering why I put this one in. Oh, okay, I know. This was a a warning kickback. Kickstarter, sorry. This is a, look guys, it's not going to work. So Mega Sector is basically a first person or third person shooter. You know, your Call of Duty style. They've got an engine up, you know, it looks like, and running, but there is no way you are going to compete with shooters in the bargain bin. You know, you're not going to compete with the first edition of Halo. And I think it's going to be really hard for something like this to get funded. This is where, even if you have some original ideas, the genre is so oversaturated by the AAA market. This is not a space indies want to play in. You know, I know we've talked about Hawken before, and the reason that Hawken is a mech game, they wanted to make a first-person shooter, but if they made a first-person shooter with regular units, regular guys, you know, soldiers, no one would care. Make it with mechs, all of a sudden everybody cares.
You have to have something that makes it unique. Now, it looks like they're flying something around.
Well, he talks about vehicles and in the thing as well, so which is not new to...
It's not new, but if you can do it if you can integrate it in a way that other games don't,
Now, this last one that I have is a game that I played when it came out, Battle Chess.
As did I. You can actually buy this on Good Old Games.
Can you?
GOG. Yes.
That's kind of cute. It's straight chess. The battling does not determine... It's not like you fight for the square, and then that piece or the other piece wins the square. So if you're better at the first-person shooter than you are at the chess... No. It is straight a chess engine that just has cute animations when you take a piece. I think this worked in the 8-bit retro era, right? Because it was kind of 8-bit, and it was kind of funny the way they did it, you know. But high-level graphics and doing it that way, I don't know that this... And again, just a chess game.
Yeah.
I don't know that this is something that needs to be redone.
It's the type of thing that you go on like GOG and put down $5 and you have everything you want. In fact, I think the bundle that comes on that site is like...
Does it include the Chinese chess and the Chinese battle chess and the space battle chess?
Yes, the space. I saw the space and I'm like, why would I ever want the space? Like, I've got the original classic one. That's what I want to play.
Yep.
But, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, in chat, GA Tech Grad is talking about playing it on his 386, and yeah, we had an 8088 that we ran it on, but we had that Tandy 8088, and the next computer I got was a 486. So that tells you, like, I was probably running it at the time of 386s. There was a lot of stuff that we forced to run that could not really run well on that computer. And then when they got the 486, processors had advanced so fast that the games ran so fast I couldn't play them. Anyway, that really hits the show this week. I think I covered all the Kickstarter. I think Battle Chess was the last one. Yep. Yes, it was. Anything upcoming? Anything we need to get out and announce? We didn't talk Captain Dubstep this week, but I think we're going to just sit on a week and
not much really
have a good update next week. There's some things we could talk about, but I think it just makes more sense to update next week. You may have seen my tweets about FL Studio after I praised it so heavily last one. The motherfucking thing does not save your project if you open another project by, you know, in my case, it was an accident. I didn't even realize I was opening another project. I'm like, why are the plugins reloading? I don't... why the menus? Holy shit, I accidentally opened a project and it never prompted to say, hey, you have unsaved changes in your current project. You want to save first. If you close FL Studio, it says that, but not if you click the wrong thing, and man, it's quick to load up another project. It doesn't waste any time, and I lost about an hour's worth of work.
And I came downstairs at that point and I was like, oh, it's about that time. It's like... And I'm about to stab this computer in the face.
So, I've lost the wub with FL Studio. I no longer feel the wub.
It's just over one tiny thing, you know? Like, that's fun.
You delete an hour of work, and...
I don't mean tiny, but I mean, it's comparatively speaking, like the work that goes into like building in that function, versus other competing products that work in completely different ways. I don't know. I can't imagine that not coming up after all this stuff.
We should have a good update, maybe even a Captain Dubstep Diary update next week. I'm going to take a few days off next week, probably Tuesday through Thursday. I'll probably go in Monday and I'll go in Friday and book in my... I'll probably say fuck it Friday, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But I'll go in Monday to kind of just set the week that I'm not going to be there. And then, spend some time. Now, my main goal will be to sketch out our level, to get the level that we want for Dream Build Play done in our tiled map editor. The rough, not placing all the monsters and everything, but basically get the whole thing on there. That'll also give us a good feel of if we are right on our memory usage. If I think we can just go ahead and load the whole damn thing at once and not have to do level switching, it'll let us know if we can do that. And if we can't, now's a good time to know.
Yeah, I was going to say, level switching is something we want to build in early.
Because right now our code is not written that way at all to handle... You just load one level. That's it. Using tiled is what we're using. And so... which there's room for improvement on Nick Gravelin's tiled. The way it uses memory can be improved. So we may choose to improve that some instead of redoing the way we do our... I
got a memory counter in the game now. And, of course, Xbox seems to allocate differently than Windows does.
Yeah.
But on Windows, I was like, I had no memory allocations going on, except for like the audio engine, the XNA audio engine, and the tiled lib, and I'm like, okay, that's as good
now,
as...
Now, when I ran XNA, see, this is the other thing. You need to run on the Xbox, and you got that profiler that comes with on there,
run that.
Because Exact performs differently with garbage on Windows versus Xbox. Okay. And actually, I had a version... I don't know if I've made changes that affected this, but I had a no garbage version of the Exact audio engine running.
Okay.
But on Xbox.
Well, okay.
Not on the PC. On the PC it was creating garbage, but getting garbage collected on the PC is not a big deal.
Yeah, well, I just have the memory counter, like it updates like you did in Draco Wing. So... At this point, I really can't tell where...
Now, you gotta be careful that you don't actually generate memory in the memory counter itself, too.
Oh, from the strings?
Yeah.
I probably am doing that, actually, because I don't have any constants set up. But, yeah.
All right. That is a podcast for this week. Thank you, every pony, for tuning in and listening. We'll be back in a week.